Hello everybody, this is Lara from Pure Elliott Wave with your, this week, Tuesday to Friday update for Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP and Solana. I didn't give you an update yesterday because I was not very well, so I had to reduce my workload to the absolute minimum. Bitcoin's moving still sideways. It's now hitting resistance at this zone, 71,500 to 73,100. Within this big sideways movement, there's currently an upward swing to resistance. ADX tells us there's now an upward trend, and the probability of an upward breakout is greater than the probability of a downward breakout. That's because this rectangle pattern occurs in the context of following upward movement. When rectangles occur after an upward trend, then 2/3 of the time they break out up, 1/3 of the time they break out down. So that is what we've been expecting for weeks now, an upward breakout. Let's see how price behaves in the next couple of days around resistance at 73,100. An upward breakout requires a close above resistance on an upward session with support from volume. That's important. If you don't have support from volume, then we can't have confidence in the breakout. We may see a little bit of a pullback about resistance before price is able to break out. Yesterday's upward session for the 20th of May has got really weak volume according to my bar chart volume data. A little bit suspicious about that. But we did have a strong session a few days ago. Last week, 15th of May, was quite strong for Bitcoin. So for the very short term, there is now a little bit of a push from volume with an upward movement. There has been an upward breakout above a couple of resistance lines on this bar chart data. This line has a bit of a slope, but it's long held and has quite a few tests. This shorter line is shorter held, but it still has 4 tests, and it's got a much more shallow slope. On-balance volume is broken above both of those, so we do have a breakout from on-balance volume, suggesting we may get a breakout from price sooner rather than later. ADX is increasing. It's telling us that Bitcoin is in a new upward trend in a relatively early stage. It's a fairly strong bullish signal because the ADX line has risen up from below both DX lines, but not as strong as it could be because it didn't manage to get below 15, but it did get to a pretty low level. So this is a pretty strong bullish signal from ADX. This suggests that we may get an upward breakout sooner rather than later. RSI is neutral. There is still plenty of room to go before ADX reaches very extreme and RSI reaches as deeply overbought as it can get during a bullish run. Money flow is neutral, in fact below 50, a very long way to go before RSI, money flow and ADX together reach as extreme as they can get. I will expect to see an increase in ATR as volatility returns to the market, but it may not happen until after a breakout. Resistance might be like a lid on a boiling pot. The pot's starting to come to the boil, but we might not have the overflow and pushing off the lid yet. When we do have an upward breakout, a close above resistance on an upward session with push from volume, I'd liken that to the pot is boiled over and now we're going to have a huge release in energy. So that's what I'm expecting coming up for Bitcoin. Ethereum had a ripper of a day yesterday, huge upward session, and then it's gapped higher. I'm a little bit suspicious of the gap on Bitcoin and Ethereum's data from bar chart. Let me know if you're seeing gaps for these two in your data as well, please. Ethereum's gapped higher. If we can trust the gap, then using the previous move of the gap from this low to this high, adding that distance to the lower edge of this candlestick gives us a target from the measuring gap at 4305.52. So I'll expect more upward movement from Ethereum to that point before we may see another little consolidation or pullback. Along the way up though, it's going to have to breach resistance at 4,100, maybe breaching what was resistance at 3,680. If it closes above that point, then resistance turns to support. The last completed upward session has some push from volume. For Ethereum, on-balance volume remains within a reasonably significant range. We'll wait for a breakout to give a signal. ADX is increasing. The positive DX line is above the negative. ADX has a positive slope and is above 15, and so it's telling us there is an upward trend because the ADX line has started to have a positive slope from below both DX lines at the point at which it began. It's coming up from below both DX lines, so that's a strong signal. It didn't come up from below 15 though, that would be the strongest signal. ADX is telling us there is an upward trend in an early stage for Ethereum. RSI is neutral. There's plenty of room to go before ADX and RSI reach extreme, RSI can reach deeply overbought and remain there while price travels a considerable distance for this market. Likewise, money flow is neutral, in fact below 50. There's a long way to go before this new trend becomes extreme. ATR overall still continuing to show a decline. I'll expect ATR to start to show an increase as volatility returns to the market if we see an upward breakout. The Elliott Wave count for XRP remains the same. It expects a second wave correction as a double combination is complete back here at the April 15th low, and so it expects that that low is going to be sustained for years to come. This wave count expects a huge third wave is in the beginning of its middle stage. The target 29.01 is where primary 3 would reach 15.66 times the length of primary 1. That's not a Fibonacci ratio. That's the length between primary 3 and 1 within cycle 1. So that's a previous third wave length. We could see that again. It's really interesting to note I've changed my analysis from crypto compare data to bar chart data. And it's interesting to note that it's got different moving average crossovers. The data really is quite different. There was a death cross back here on the 22nd of February as the 50-day moving average crossed below the 200 that didn't yield any downward movement. In fact, it was followed by upward movement, and then a golden cross, which is a bullish signal, back on the 3rd of April, where the 50-day, which is the purple, crosses above the 200-day, which is the green. That's a bullish signal. And then that was followed by downward movement. That's another illustration why I use these as late confirmatory tools, because they're such lagging indicators. The 50-day moving average does still remain above the 200-day moving average. Currently, if we do get a 50-day crossover below the 200 again, and there are other bearish indicators on this chart, then I would be a little bit bearish. But on its own, I'm not going to take that as a big signal. A little bit of a push from volume. Compared to the previous couple of downward sessions for XRP, the volume profile quite mixed, overall continuing to move lower as price is essentially moving sideways. No signal from on-balance volume, it remains within a tight range, but the resistance and support lines have quite a steep slope, so not good technical significance. ADX is declining, there's no clear trend indicated for XRP. The model of stochastics plus support and resistance would expect overall an upward swing to continue until price hits resistance simultaneously, with stochastics getting close to or at overbought. This is the main Elliott Wave count for Solana. It still expects a fourth wave at primary degree to continue lower, for intermediate C to move below the end of A, so a new low below 119.3848 to avoid a truncation. The target for primary wave 4 is the 0.618 Fibonacci ratio of primary 3 at 114.7645. However, I have some concerns because technicals are fairly bullish for Solana, and so for this wave count, I want this trend channel to be breached by a full red daily candlestick below and not touching this trend line before I really have confidence in this Elliott Wave count. The reason why that's the main Elliott Wave count is it has the best fit in terms of Elliott Wave. This is a valid alternate. It just doesn't look right. Primary 4 here would be a double combination, zigzag, X, expanded flat, but it's got a downward slope. Combinations should be sideways movements. This is very clearly a counter trend sloped movement. So it doesn't look like a good looking combination. The probability is reduced in Elliott Wave terms, but I just don't know if Solana has the volume to have good looking Elliott Wave structures. This does meet all Elliott Wave rules, it just doesn't fit that guideline. And that's why they're guidelines, not rules. You don't have to meet the guidelines, but you do have to meet all the rules all the time, which I will always do. Technicals for Solana, it broke above what was resistance at 168. Resistance turns to support. Look for next resistance above at 210. It broke above resistance on an upward session with some push from volume. For the short term, the volume profile is bullish. Strongest sessions in recent weeks have been on bullish sessions. Solana also has an upward breakout above resistance from on-balance volume, and this resistance line has 4 tests. It is somewhat long held and very shallow sloped, so it has reasonable technical significance. This signal from on-balance volume is a reasonable bullish signal that expects that Solana is likely to see an upward breakout above resistance sooner rather than later. Sometimes when on-balance volume gives us these signals, it happens before price breaks out, and when it does, it can be used as a leading indicator or advance warning telling us what price is most likely going to do next. Not certain, but most likely. That's supported by ADX rising up from not too low a level, but not too high. Now have a positive slope. It's the positive DX lines above the negative. ADX tells us that Solana is in an upward trend in a relatively early stage. RSI is not overbought, and nor is money flow. There's a long way to go before ADX, RSI and money flow together reach as extreme as they can get. ATR now starting to show an increase for Solana as volatility starts to return to this market. It does look more likely than not that Solana may see an upward breakout sooner rather than later. And that's it for me today with a quick update for you. I hope everyone had a lovely weekend.